So here we are back with the 1990 Longblock 5-liter 302 that we did the compression test on a few weeks back. And it's just been sitting on the stand quite literally, waiting for this rebuild kit to come in from Summit Racing. So it finally came in yesterday. Everything seems to be in here. So we got new piston rings, we got all our bearings, and then full seal and gasket kit. Going to degrease this motor, get it all cleaned up, start pulling. We'll take the valve covers off. Everything's all loosened, and get it clean, pull it apart, and inspect all the internals. All the compression was quite decent, so it should just be replacement of the rings, and then re-gasket everything up, paint what we want, and stuff it in the car. All right, so the motor's fairly clean. Got that degreased, got all the big chunks out. Did make quite a bit of mess underneath, so I forgot to tell you guys, make sure you put a big piece of cardboard. It's all folded up now with all the gunk and the grease and all of the debris folded on the inside to keep everything nice and tidy. So valve covers are loose, lower intake manifold is loose. I'm going to use this cordless impact to take the cylinder heads off, and just little things, the power steering bracket here, that's already loosened off, so it should be pretty straightforward in terms of pulling the rest of this apart. Definitely should have worn a different pair of shoes today. You might not want to wear your bright white shoes when you're doing degreasing and dirty work, but hey, it is what it is. Kept them pretty clean. So that's it, guys. Just going to, we'll time lapse this and just start pulling everything apart. You do want to be conscious, when you're taking bolts out, make sure that you arrange them nice and neat and tidy, and document which bolts and nuts that you took off from which locations, so that way when you're reassembling things, it's going to make your life much easier. All right, guys, so I've just pulled off the top end of the motor, minus the head, so the valve covers are off. You can see all the rockers are all exposed here. Lower intake manifold is off. So everything looks pretty clean and tidy. Now we're gonna go ahead, we'll start taking off all of these rockers, pull all the rods out, and then get these heads ready to get unbolted and lift off. So these heads should be fine. We do have new valve seals that came with our rebuild kit, so those can all get redone. We'll go ahead now and rotate this block over, so that way we can take off the oil pan, and we'll remove the pump. Then we will get into a position that we can remove the pistons and start getting the cylinder bores all honed up, and from there, that'll allow us to redo our bearings and install our new pistons rings, clean everything up, and put this thing back together. So it looks like it's a lot of work, but in reality, just take your time, follow a good pace. Again, document where everything that you took off went, so when you put everything back together, it'll make your life a lot easier. All right, guys, so here we are. The pan is off. Looks pretty clean in here. There's no metal shavings or anything like that. And now we can see the inside of the motor. I got our crankshaft here, the oil pumps. We're going to go ahead, pull this oil pump off, pull these caps, and then we can get ourselves in a position to pull the pistons out. Alright guys, so all the pistons are out. It's good to keep everything together. You can see there's actually markings. So this one here is piston number 5, so you want to make sure that the cap number matches the connecting rod number so that when you're putting everything back together, it's the same way that it came off.
Put a bumper on it. Can I have the bumper off your white Dodge? That's right back there in the corner.
Can I have the bumper?
What are you going to do with it?
Well, consider I probably got about $400 to $500 invested in that bumper.
Oh, so it's free.
No.
No, I'm roll pan in the front and the back. I am, and I'm color matching the grill. The whole truck's going white, other than the mirrors, door handles, and the chrome strip. Oh, are you doing that? Are you color matching everything too? Come on, you're not
You already know that.
No, I don't. No, I don't. Riley would have told me. Me and Riley were already talking about color matching everything. Like literally, like color matching the here, like no chrome, like color matching the lights, everything. What the is going on with your truck before I start doing things with this truck? I need to know. Or they can just match. Mine's gonna be cooler, but that's okay. Just kidding, mine's not gonna be cooler. This truck's not gonna see as much money as yours. So, do you want to finish this truck for me? I'll go down. I'll build you a sweet Foxbody.
Here's just keep it.
Dad, you're not taking it back.
How do you take something back that hasn't been paid for?
Exactly, so stop.
So you can see behind me here, got the short block sitting on the engine stand. We tore all that down last week. Went pretty quick. Got everything kind of in piles here, trying to keep everything organized. So now it's the cleanup time before we get ready to install our Summit Racing rebuild kit. So I've been spending some time over here on the Varsol tank. You can see that the lower intake manifold came up real nice here. Only got one valve cover because the other one's full of nuts and bolts. So just kind of going through the pistons now. You can see that the carbon buildup isn't that bad. I've already pulled all the rings off. So just been going over those, cleaning them up, getting everything off so that they're nice and clean so we can get the rings installed and everything else before they go back for assembly. So as you can see here guys, just using the Varsol tank, letting the Varsol soak down into the little bit of carbon that was on the top of these pistons. Nothing too bad, wasn't caked on too much. You can tell I've been working hard because I already blew out my second pair of gloves for the day. So yeah, just letting that Varsol sink in there, using a purple Scotch pad just to get off any of the deposits and rubbing that on and cleaning everything up, and also getting the ring areas nice and clean so that way the surfaces are going to be nice, clean, and tidy for when we put our new rings on these guys. And the pistons are in overall really good shape. You know, there's no nicks or grooves or holes or anything like that, so these are going to be a perfect candidate to put back into this block. You can see lower intake, timing cover, thermostat housing, power steering bracket, all these little things, nuts and bolts, valve covers. Got all the pistons all cleaned up as I showed to you guys earlier. So that's kind of the worst part of the job, right? Tear down is fun, but it's all the cleanup and the preparation and doing all those things. But those are extremely important to make sure that you have the end result that you want, and you definitely don't want to cut corners when it comes to your motor. Another morning here, one step closer to the reassembly of the motor for the 93 roller car, and you can see I got some parts spread out laying here behind me. Got the valve covers and the oil pan. These have all been prepped, so sanded, cleaned up with some brake clean, and ready to get some primer in the bare metal areas. Oil pan had a little bit of corrosion in a few spots, so those were all sanded down really well and treated with some rust converter. So we're going to go ahead and hit that with some primer, and then once that's dry, we'll hit it with our final top coat of Ford Gray. So just using Duplicolor engine enamel for this project. Nothing too crazy, but you do want to make sure that you use your proper paints, especially even the primer, because when components get really warm, you know, that can cause discoloration, it can cause cracking, it can cause, you know, your paint not to last at the end of the day. So there's nothing worse than you putting in all this time to make your engine look good, and a couple months down the road the paint starts flaking, peeling off, or changing color. So keep that in mind, guys. Worth the extra investment. So I've just wiped all this stuff down with brake clean. Everything should be ready, so we'll get into spraying this primer and then get that color on. This is Duplicolor Ford Gray, so I have to say it does look very similar to what would come from factory. Very happy with how these turned out. Alright guys, so behind me you can see I have the lower intake manifold, and I just did one coat of what you would see on this left hand side, the metal cast Duplicolor, and on the right of that can is the aluminum color, and the lids look very similar, but when I sprayed this metal cast, you can actually see how dark this got, and that's only one coat. So it's a little darker than what I was going for, so I think I'm actually just going to go ahead and use the aluminum color, and you'll actually see the difference of, even though these two look very similar, the metal cast is in fact much darker. That might be good for maybe some of the brackets, but even then I think it might be too dark. I think I might end up using a lot of the aluminum color to go over the brackets for the accessories and all those types of things. So there we go. Sometimes a little bit of trial and error. Gonna let this coat dry up a little bit here and then go ahead and spray the aluminum color and see what happens. So we're gonna go ahead now and try the aluminum engine enamel instead of this metal cast, and you're probably gonna see how much lighter it is. Oh yeah, that's much better. You can see the difference there already, guys. So here you can see that's one coat of the metal cast, and this is about one coat on top of that, just using the straight up aluminum color. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going with the aluminum, and this lower intake should look brand new when done. Alright guys, you can see I got the cylinder heads behind me here. Just getting them all cleaned up, trying to get a little bit of the carbon off the valves, clean up the chambers here. So all I'm doing is using a purple Scotch pad, spraying on some WD-40 to keep everything lubricated, getting everything all cleaned up. This will all obviously get blown down, make sure that any debris and everything else isn't still here before reassembling.
Alright, so we have our intake valve that we just removed. I ran it through the wire wheel on the bench grinder, just cleaned up any carbon deposits on the face of it and also on the back side, a little bit up the stem and also on our valve seat surface. So you're going to need to get some valve grinding or lapping compound, and if you just put a bit along the edges where your valve seat is going to be, doesn't take a whole lot. Then you're going to install your valve. Give a quick wipe on the surface there, because your lapping tool may not stick to that. Give a little clean there. And we have this valve lapping tool. So basically it's two suction cups, two different sizes. This will typically fit your intake valves. This is typically going to fit your smaller exhaust valves. So install on the valve, and then you're going to want to move it back and forth But after you've done it a little bit, you actually pick it up, rotate the valve, set it back down, grind it in a new spot, and then do that a handful of times. So we'll just go over that for a minute. That's just going to ensure that you get a smooth, even surface on that valve or on the seat, as opposed to just doing it in one spot. So you can actually clean this valve off. You'll be able to see we've actually got a lot of that cleaned up. Any pitting, most of it's come out there. There's a little bit, but nothing that's going to cause a major concern for us. And on the seats, you can see that it's cleaned up really, really nice as well. That's going to make sure that we don't have any compression leaking. Optimal performance right there. And it's really not a hard thing to do, pretty cheap. That's the most expensive part, is probably this spring compressor. You can probably get one at your Harbor Freight for $30, $40, maybe not even that. Valve grinding compound, it's $10, and then a lapping tool, $6 or $7. So it's really not that expensive, really not overcomplicated, just takes a bit of time, and you just don't want to rush through it. All right, so these are the new valve seals, valve guide seals, that we will install in the upper portion of the cylinder head after we get all the valves done. Right now we're going to go over how to get the stuck keepers out, and then proceed into how to lap a valve. So to start, get yourself a large C-clamp. 14 mil socket in particular on this one works well, and we're going to install it on the top and then actually press on the bottom of the valve. This doesn't take a lot of pressure, just give it a turn or two and you will actually hear it pop, just like that. Keeper is now freed up. Now we can use our valve spring tool and install it here. And we are going to compress the spring. Now the trick here is you don't have to compress it all the way, completely bind the spring. You just need to get it deep enough that you can get the keepers out. We actually have that retainer stuck here, so we're going to give it a little tap. Freed up. And you can see these two small keepers in here. Easiest way to try and get them out is with a magnet. They may fall out of there, but sometimes they are tight. If you don't have enough, give it a little more pressure. And we have one valve spring removed. So now you're going to want to clean up anything that is remaining in the port. You can have remnants of intake gaskets from disassembly there, or just buildup of anything that's fallen down in there since the engine has not been running. So you want to get that nice and clean before we go to lap the valve, because we don't want any debris getting in there. Alright, so we've got this head fully disassembled, cleaned, took it into the Varsol tank, cleaned out all the ports, any debris from gaskets that were sitting in there after it was disassembled, and then we lapped all the valves on this one. Everything turned out really nice, and also cleaned the surface, head gasket mating surface on the head as well. Right now what we're going to do is start to reassemble. Before that, we're going to go over a couple valve guide seals. So here we have 2 valve guide seals left, and they're not overly challenging to remove. You can get a trim tool or any prying tool. They do pop right off there. New ones we have here. They look a little different. You're going to get some variants in manufacturers as well. These are original Ford, and these are the ones that came in our kit from Summit Racing. So for installation, you can flip up the head upright, give these all a wipe down, make sure that we don't have anything remaining there. Then you can just take them, put them on, and press them on with your thumb, and you will hear it go down. They may not fully seat. Go over them with a small hammer and a chrome. I used a 14 mil socket just to make sure that they're fully seated. Because sometimes they may go on a little crooked there. We have our socket here. You press it over top. Just give it a couple taps. You'll be able to tell when it's fully seated. That one, obviously, a little higher. You can hear the tone change as it fully seats. All right. It's important to note, as you take this all apart, lay it out on the bench the way it just gets disassembled, and then you're going to want to have your cylinder head in the same orientation as when you took it apart. So you're going to have everything going back to its original home. No variances that way. Basically, take your valve. I'm putting assembly lube on them just to clean them up a bit, or to help them go into that new seal so we don't get any tears. Insert them in, up and through. We've got our springs all cleaned. Before you install the spring, there's this little fiber washer. I'm just going to install it back where it originally was. Then you have the washer or the spring that goes on top. Then you have the spring that goes on top, and then we are going to compress it down same way as when we disassembled. Again, you don't have to completely bind them out, but make sure that they're far enough down that your keepers are actually going to go in. There's a groove on the top of the valve, and these seat right in there. And then if you pull up, you'll actually get that will start to seat there. So you know that you've got it far enough in. You can start backing this off, and you know that it's going to seat properly. Little pop as it seats there. Slide your tool off, and there's a reinstalled valve. Now we just have 7 more to go. Repeat the process. Take your time. Just ensure that everything goes back in where it came from. Make sure everything's cleaned. That is important. A little fiber washer again. The exhaust springs, the actual seat is all one piece, whereas on the intake springs it is 2 pieces, so you just have to make sure that piece is seated in there before you try and put the keepers in. Make sure you back your tool off all the way, it goes on a lot easier. Install the keepers. Pull up so they seat, and then release the tension. There we have it.
Good job.